Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to The Real Report. Thanks for tuning in, and make sure to hit the subscribe button with the notification bell to stay up to date. Smash that like button, and let's shoot for 500 likes. Comment down below any interesting thoughts, comments, or concerns. What we're going to be talking about today is the United States Military Week. This is not a video on Russia versus the U.S. versus U.S.-China. Or anything like that. This is an assessment done by the Conservative Heritage Foundation in its annual index of U.S. military strength. Now, quick shout out before we get into the article. Thank you again, Rob, for the donation. I'm finally back from my 2-day bender. Now, all joking aside, I thought this 30-second clip is worth listening to.
Just talked about this in their report. We need to have an industrial revolution as it relates to our military hardware and infrastructure of what we can build. But we also need to have the same industrial revolution for our supply chain. You know, Congress can grant all the money in the world that it wants to the Pentagon to build this equipment. But if we can't source everything, if we're still dependent on China to support to source the rare earths or the materials and the equipment we're trying to build, well, then we have a holistic scary problem.
That's what I mean when I say we're building a better America.
So I wholeheartedly agree with her there. The United States military spent too many decades focusing on different types of equipment needs on the ground in the Middle East and has neglected, which I've covered in multiple videos, our Air Force in particular. Now, also to understand, if you're new here, you're also missing about 53 other videos I've done, so you might not have the entire context with the lens of how I'm looking at this information, so definitely check those videos out as well. Now, the U.S. military may not be able to win one war, let alone two, as the Pentagon struggles to keep its forces equipped against potential threats from China and Russia, according to a new report on American military strength. Years of underfunding and poorly defined priorities has led the military to become, quote, weak relative to the force needed to defend national interests on the global stage, the Conservative Heritage Foundation said in its annual index of U.S. military strength. Now, the current U.S. military force is at significant risk of not being able to meet the demands of a single major regional conflict. Now, this is, again, a big point that I've made many times before. We can't simultaneously fight even two proxy wars, let alone an actual boots-on-the-ground war, say, in Ukraine and Taiwan simultaneously. Now, the force would probably not be able to do more and is certainly ill-equipped to handle two nearly simultaneous major conflicts. At the same time, the possibility of two-front fighting has increased as Russia continues to wage war on Ukraine and China grows increasingly aggressive in the Pacific, according to the report. The report rated only the Marine Corps as strong, so at least we have that going for us. And also thank you to everybody who has served, and if you're in the Marine Corps, Semper Fi. In the think tank's assessment of force capacity, capability, and readiness, while the Army achieved a marginal rating, the Space Force and Navy were labeled weak, and the Air Force bottomed out at very weak. Modernization programs, especially in shipbuilding, continue to suffer as resources are committed to preparing for the future, recovering from 20 years, it's actually been decades longer than that, of operations and offsetting the effects of inflation. The particular problem with that is if you look at our priority theater, the Indo-Pacific, the two priority services are the Navy and the Air Force, and those seem to be the ones that are doing the worst. Now, the House Armed Services Committee members told reports, again, you can see here, Air Force rated downgraded to very weak, the Navy, space, and overall weak, Army, marginal. Still, the Marine Corps and our nuclear capabilities are strong. Unfortunately, not rated at very strong. But also to remember, this isn't a direct comparison to any other military. I have no doubt that our readiness overall is still unmatched on the global stage. Congress' intention to increase the proposed budget by 5% accounts for barely half the current rate of inflation, which is nearing 10%. And as anybody who's gone to a grocery store and hasn't been living under a rock for the last 8 months knows that inflation is exponentially higher than just 10%. My grocery bill has quite literally doubled. And not having enough personnel, weapons, and other equipment to fight a war that was also listed by the armed forces as a capacity problem. Now, the report rates the Navy worse than its sister services, dropping its capacity rating 2 notches from marginal to very weak, the lowest on the scale. Part of the issue is the Biden administration's diplomacy-first mindset of substituting soft power for hard power, which Gallagher called naive at best. Now, to fight in 2 wars, the think tank said the Navy would need about 400 ships, a drastic bump from the current 292 ships the service said it has. As of last week. In 2018, Congress passed a law mandating that the Navy reach a target of 355 ships as soon as possible. Instead, the service has cut ships faster than they've built them. Now, the U.S. has about half the ships it had during the Cold War for reference, but the number of ships at sea at any given time is about 100. Now, here is a quote: "You're working your ships twice as hard, the crews twice as hard, maintenance problems mount, so when it finally gets into the shipyard, there's more work that has to be done than was anticipated," Wood said. Now, the British Royal Navy, here's where we get into some other military comparisons. The British Royal Navy is down to a mere 17 or 18 surface combatants total. China's adding almost the equivalent of the British Royal Navy to its own fleet almost every single year, certainly every 2 years. The lesson is we have to rebuild our munitions industrial base as well. The Defense Production Act could be modernized and used for actual defense purposes, not for baby formula. So a couple interesting takeaways from here. So keep an eye out on that. I'm going to do another video right after this one talking about the undersea cables, which, in case you guys missed that from the EU, you're going to want to check that out. So thank you guys for tuning in. If you found this interesting, again, leave a like, comment down below, hit the subscribe button, and share, and I'll see you guys in the next one.